I'm going online, so
All right.
don't say anything you don't want.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, Lily.
Hi, Lily.
You're online now?
Mhm.
Oh, well, yes, hi, Lily.
Hi, Lily.
And hi, Pam.
Yeah, Pam's watching. You know
We
that.
miss you, Pam.
Yeah.
Well, just us chickens.
About that radio presence.
Peter, I feel like I should have questions, but I just can never think of any. I just drive around and think about, like, I do noticing and then I don't do it and then I do it some more and then I don't. And then
That's it.
yeah.
That's the whole shooting match.
And then I don't know why I bother, but sometimes I'll listen to some spiritual person and they'll say, well, you know, you're wasting your life if you don't pay attention to what's around you. And I was just as happy like watching a great show, like I'm watching this, as I am noticing.
Sure, of course. Why not? It's all beautiful. It's all.
I knew you were gonna say that.
There's absolutely no hierarchy. There's absolutely no better or worse in anything, in phenomena. In there's no downside. There's no upside. There's no right. There's no wrong.
And yet I still have suffering.
Sure.
So then I think, well, I'm still having suffering. Perhaps if I bothered and noticed a little more, I'd find my way out of this.
Perhaps, or not. Who knows? Yeah.
Oh, okay. This is why I never have any questions.
I'm useless.
Change what's happening. This is what I find that I am.
Yeah.
I'm noticing and I'm watching TV.
Sure. Sounds like a good life.
It is pretty good. I know what you're going to. So we were taught that certain traumas are sort of stored in our nervous system.
Mhm.
When something happens that's like whatever happened initially, it comes back at you.
Could you grab me a napkin or two? Thank you.
It's like you re-experience this pain. It's not really about now, it's about
Right.
whatever that was.
Sure.
But from what I get from you, that's can't happen because there's no past and everything's being created.
Well, it's not that it can't happen. It's that whatever happens is not what you think it is, and certainly not what is being defined to be simplistically. There can be, thank you so much. There can be virtually any kind of, apparent energy presentations, but exactly what they are and what they're about and what their interconnection, if any, with any other energy patterns, if any, is about, is always going to be an open question. You can never sort out that, oh, this is this and that's that, this is because of this and that's because of that, even if there is a because. You can't say there isn't a because, but you can't say there is a because. You can't say there is cause and effect. You can't say there isn't cause and effect. So it's everything's up for grabs. But virtually any kind of energy patterning can appear, and there's all sorts of opportunity for interacting with it with all kinds of interesting, interactive, intelligent or less intelligent process. And that is itself, its own kind of a learning curve or art form. But nothing ever gets resolved or gets finalized or gets sorted out or determined as actually being one thing or another thing. All these interpretations of his theories. I mean, I often talk about how everything is created in the moment, but that's not literally true. The remedial perspective to the normal perspective of, oh, you know, there's this vast stretch of history stretching back 15 billion years there into the, you know, infinity in the future. And it's this huge stretch of time and it's all kind of sitting here. The weight of it, you know, is bearing down on us and we're embedded in this incredible chain of cause and effect. And it's like, well, you know, and it's not that the one is true and the other isn't, or the other's true and the one isn't. It's that the way things are is not simple. And it's certainly not determinable that everything instantaneously, it just comes out of nothing, but it's not determinable that it isn't either. You know, so, and the two are not necessarily contradictory. That there is 15 billion years of history and cause and effect and that it all happens in the instant. Maybe that's just how, maybe that's how it is. It's both in some way that makes absolutely no, you can't wrap your head around.
So
but,
then you've given me a good look at that situation where you, something happens, you'll get a sense of what the initial problem was, and then, but that's kind of, even that's more insightful than a lot of people, that's still kind of simplistic. So you could go try to, okay, now you've figured out maybe what the start of that was, but you could go from there and, like you just said, like, go in all different directions with that. And,
yeah.
Yeah, so that's cool. That's a new way.
But any direction you take in it is just going to be a hypothesis.
Yeah, but you can, at least there's more exploration there.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I don't know about anybody else, but I'm always looking for a way out of that process happening over and over again.
Sure.
So.
And well, and the way out is to discover that it's not. You're not stuck in anything, because you can only be stuck in it if it was what you were thinking it is, which is something you could be stuck in. Maybe it's something that it actually is not. You're not stuck in, and it's impossible to be stuck in. That happens to look the same way. It's like the joke, you know. Last night in the middle of the night, someone broke into my house and changed every single thing I owned for an exact duplicate of what it was. You know, it's like, that's a viable explanation. Yeah. It's a viable, maybe that could happen. How would you know? But it points out that there's not any way that things are. And it turns out that to be stuck in things, there has to be a way that things are.
All right, well, anyway.
I mean, you know.
For me, like, as soon as I go, oh, that's not what's happening now. That's not what I have feeling. I'm already not stuck.
Yeah.
But then to go, besides going back in the past and saying, well, what the heck is this? To even, okay, go beyond that somehow. And looking for a way to go beyond that, then it would become less and less and less stuck.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you're on a detective.
Yeah, it becomes a fun exploration, and boldly going where no one's gone before, rather than being stuck in something that sucks. You know, as one develops skill, or let's say as one unfolds progressively into noticing, into this yoga, into the nature of the radiance, it becomes clearer and clearer that the patterns themselves are literally infinite. You know, in the moment, not just theoretically, but actually, concretely infinite. So any way whatsoever that it seems to be is just a kind of an interface point, like it's a particular angle on it, of which there's infinite other angles, all of which look different, and they're all simultaneously present. It's one way to try and put that.
So if you're clever, you might be able to find those.
Well, when you as unfoldment proceeds, you don't even need to find them, because you know they're there. Mm-hmm. You just have a bedrock certainty. Oh, this is infinite. It happens to be looking like that at the moment, it's kind of like well, the view out the window of my car happens to look like it does in the moment, but in actual fact, it's not actually that. It just happens to look like that because of the particular alignment of perspective or something. Is a sort of a vague way to analogize it. But
No, that makes sense.
but this becomes more and more palpable and more a priori, where rather than having to fight it or prove it experientially each time, it's just a basic sense of feeling that, oh, that's what it is.
Trust.
Well, it's more profound than trust. It's a certainty because it becomes, you get more sensitive to perceiving that it is actually that in real time. But noticing is what takes you there. Noticing is what establishes that perspective. Noticing by its very nature teaches a greater and greater sensitivity to experiential presence, and in that sensitivity, one discovers the astounding nonlinearity that the experiential presence actually consists of.
In noticing, it seems that we don't, it's a question of what is doing the noticing, or how is noticing happening, and what is the nature of that which notices. And it seems as if we can't get a handle on that. We can't know what that is. But also involved in that is can be an identity with the noticing. It's like, it seems like there can be a feeling of recognition of being the noticer.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
As opposed to not being the noticer, but noticing happening.
Sure.
And are those distinctions any closer to knowing more about what this is? Or
The distinctions are completely irrelevant. They're just different modes that this can show up in. But it's always the same thing. Whether you're, in other words, there's this one phenomena right here. Okay, right now, bang, this. Now, you can sort of sit with it as, this is being seen. You can sit with it as it's a seeing, or you can sit with it more emphasized to this the seen, depending on sort of where you're zooming in on or where your center of gravity of orienting towards it is. But it's arbitrary because it's still the same. It's still one integral thing. So whether you lean, whether you're biased towards it from one side or biased towards it from another side or from various other angles doesn't change the basic fact. So this event here has always infinite degrees of subjectivity, always infinite degrees of objectivity, and yet it's a continuum. There's no point where subjectivity stops and objectivity begins, and vice versa. So objectivity is just a mode of subjectivity. Subjectivity is just a mode of objectivity. Identification is just a mode of both of them, and non-identification is just another mode of both of them. So it's a moot point. These are just all different. It's like different ways the dice can roll, but it's always just the dice.
So it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. That's the point of noticing, is to discover the way that it doesn't matter, because what it is intrinsic. Absolutely, regardless. There's no more or less. There's no truer or less true. It's all just anything that is it.
So that's the clarity.
Yeah.
That it can be any way.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. And any which way is.
Yeah, and any which way is nakedly and obviously it, because here it is, and how it's the here it is that matters, not the what it seems to be.
You said something earlier on, and I don't remember the words, but you said something that this reality that you're stuck in sucks. It
Did I
seems to
say that?
suck. And it seems to me that, I don't know what you said, but reality doesn't suck.
Right.
And there's no bad place.
Right.
And that what I was hearing from Emma was that there's maybe a good or a better place,
Right.
but there isn't.
Right. Yeah, which I told her.
Yeah.
And earlier, I think what I was actually telling. I'm sorry.
Again and again.
What I was actually trying to tell Nancy is you can't be stuck in it.
You can't, no.
And even if it seems to be stuck, if you look at what you're stuck in, you'll discover that what it actually is something that you can't possibly be stuck in because it doesn't have the suitable mechanism to supply stuckness.
It's not
You can't make stuckness out of open-ended infinity. It just doesn't work. You know, you can't build a jail out of air. You know, it just won't hold anything. I mean, noticing is intrinsically about discovering what experiencing is, what it's made of. I mean, or any aspect of it that you might want to approach in terms of, but none of those aspects actually exist as such, but they're all, sort of parameters to look in. You can look at it. Okay, what is it? Here's experience, right? This is it. What's it made of? What is experience made of? It's something. It's not nothing. So what is it? What's the substance of it? Or, like your question of, well, it kind of feels like it's being seen. How's that happening? What's up with that? What's seeing it? What's the seeing principle? Or it kind of looks like it's all of these different, apparently wildly divergent energy presences and patterns and so on, flavors of energy, and what's up with that? And anywhere you look at any of these, sort of jumping off points or parameters, ultimately they converge. They get to the same thing because they all are this. They aren't actually separate from each other. That sort of way of approaching it. You're approaching it in terms of looking at that sub aspect. But when you look at that sub aspect, you discover there is no sub aspect because that sub aspect doesn't actually have any boundaries or limitations and opens into the whole thing. So when you look for the seer, you find everything. When you look for the seen, you find everything. When you look for the different qualities, different flavors of energy, you find everything. And it always opens to the same thing. And this is why noticing is so powerful, because it's fundamentally integrative. It fundamentally takes you to actuality. Because everything and anything, the experience of everything and anything is actuality. So if you just are with it, and the very nature of noticing is to be with it with a flash of spontaneity or outside of a heavy-handed context of interpretation. And so in that case, the actuality is flashing you. I mean, it's just making itself known to whatever degree that becomes apparent in.
So we're back to where we started.
Yeah, you never get anywhere. You never get anywhere.
No.
You're always back to where you started.
Going back is-
Yeah, always square one is it. Square one is the finish line. Well, good news. What could be easier? But there's the deluded, confused, interpretive framework of square one sucks, versus the actuality of square one, which is an astounding, miraculous, open-ended, divine infinity. And they can coexist, because if the one exists at all, it exists in the context of and is made of the other, which is why noticing can work. If delusion and interpretive frameworks exist at all, they have to exist in the context of open-ended, infinite actuality, because that's what there is. So noticing can always happen, no matter how heavy-handedly one is approaching things in terms of an interpretive framework. That always is of actuality, which is uninterpretable, blatantly and obviously, and glaringly uninterpretable.
So it's the patterning actually that's a problem. If you think that
Yeah.
stuck in a pattern that doesn't seem to
Yeah.
have any kind of open.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And a pattern can only seem to be a stuckness, and a pattern can even only seem to be a pattern if you don't let yourself see what's actually present, if you oversimplify it. Because patterns are actually infinities. A pattern is an infinity of information, and there's no way to collapse that infinity into a this or a that.
So when you say that you allow yourself to see what's happening in that pattern, you're actually talking about specifically paying attention to how the body feels,
Anything,
what you're thinking,
anything, whatever, it doesn't matter.
and how that might be recognizable, it might be a little bit different.
Patterns are important in themselves. Those are all just more patterns. So the point is, pick any pattern and look at it and discover that it is not a closed system. It is not anything that you can wrap your head around, or you get to the bottom of it.
I find that somehow the pattern suddenly is exposed, and it's like you see it. It's like it's presented to you in that you have never seen it before, or it's like been blinded to a pattern, and then suddenly it's like the curtains are open and you can see it. And you were kind of meaning there.
Oh, yes, thank you.
And I guess if you, well, I've heard from other things, that if you accept it, recognize it, and don't interpret it or alter it, but just see it for what it is, then that seems to pull the plug out of it.
Exactly. That is what noticing is. That's the very nature of noticing, is be with what's actually present. And what's actually present is an unresolvable infinity, period. Because it is. It can't not be, because there is never anything other than that present. Nothing finite ever appears. It can't. There's nothing to make it out of. You can't build finiteness out of infinity. And noticing is simply having direct verification that is the case. Not by expecting to find that, but just look at any experience, and that is find, whether you put it in those terms or not. Actuality is the way that it is. Actuality is the way that it actually is. Actual experience is, and any experience is actually exactly the way it is. And that's the point, is to discover what the way that actuality is. That's where the power is. That's where liberation is. And the way that any actual present experience is unresolvably infinite. Period. It just is. That's what it is. That's what we got. What it's made out of. Is allowing yourself to directly contact that fact until you get more and more sophistication and subtlety and sensitivity to recognizing it and acclimatizing yourself to the flavor of that. Because it's a very contrary flavor to the flavor of, oh, this is this and that's not this and this is not that, which is the normal human mode of interpretive frameworks, which completely ignores the actuality of experiential presence. Or let's just say it oversimplifies it. Oversimplifies it.
Well, that's much more than square one. I mean,
Well, it is square one because that's where you start.
but it's aware of so much more.
Yeah, but it is, and it always has been. Delusion, interpretive frameworks is a very schizophrenic thing because, in actual fact, they actually existed. Even interpretive frameworks are themselves infinite. So they sort of bootstrap themselves up into existence out of nothing. I mean, that's the real miracle. If anything's miraculous. And if you look at the origin, when you were a newborn or an infant or in the womb, how heavy were the interpretive frameworks then? It was like, wow. So the interpretive frameworks has been a progressive overlay over naked experience, which has always been present. That never went anywhere. That was never like a bait and switch. It was just a kind of a virtual overlay. But the overlay it's all a con. All these interpretive frameworks don't actually block anything. They're completely transparent. You see right through them. You're always seeing nothing but reality. It's impossible to actually see an interpretive framework. So they kind of bootstrap themselves up into existence through an elaborate psychological self-conning job, or whatever.
Don't they also kind of limit the perceiving?
They pretend to. They don't actually. It's very schizophrenic. Who's stuck in interpretive frameworks is not actually stuck in interpretive frameworks. And they know it. So when you're lost in interpretive frameworks, you're actually sort of splitting yourself into two, which is the origin of the conscious mind and the unconscious mind. The conscious mind doesn't rest mind. It feels completely different. And it generates its own psychological entity and framework and everything. The unconscious mind is just always right here, always looking through your eyes. But the conscious mind pretends it is, and they don't talk to each other, even though it's like there's two entities living in the same being. But they aren't really, because the conscious mind is a pretense. It's not. It doesn't actually exist.
Could you elaborate on that?
No. I can say that it's true, though. It's a matter of perspective. You know what it's like? It's like the conscious mind is very precarious. If you those kinds of. In fact, I saw a YouTube. Not a YouTube. Maybe it was a YouTube. Anyway, on Facebook recently, there was a post that showed up on my thing, and it was about an artist who was using portraits of famous people, using found objects that he would just place around a room in different places. But if you cut into one exact perspective, all of a sudden it all lined up into a strikingly accurate portrait of the person. Kind of like, Salvador Dali and various other people have created paintings of that, although in that case it was a two-dimensional image, so you can't really get the perspective. But in an example of these artworks, it's just a random assortment of stuff, but you come to one perspective, all of a sudden it seems to be something very specific. But it isn't actually that, because it's just as much the other perspectives as it is that perspective. And I think I would say that the relationship between the conscious mind and the unconscious mind is something like that. Like the way it seems to be, only if it's very precarious, it looks at everything from exactly a certain perspective. And the unconscious mind is sort of wide open. It's more omnivorous. And it's with experience very non-linearly and multidimensionally, whereas the conscious mind, I think, has to, and I think we feel this with our conscious personas. It feels very delicate, and we're easily threatened and all this kind of stuff, because it's that very thing, that very awareness that, wait a minute, there's a very delicate balance here that's making this work. And so it's intuitively felt to be that that's the case, and so it's precarious. The unconscious isn't precarious at all. It doesn't give a shit. And noticing is letting go into your unconscious perspective of experience. To put it in this kind of pseudo-psychological terms, which is always happening all the time. No matter how heavy-handed a conscious mind you have, your unconscious mind is always right here, looking through your eyes, always. Never run anywhere. It's you. It's the real you. Yeah, it's the only you. But letting yourself be from that perspective opens you to the fact that you are that perspective, and you actually have access to that perspective, even though you have to sort of slip through the cracks. It's kind of a magic trick. You have to kind of slip through the cracks of the conscious by yourself to own that.
It's kind of interesting that I can't talk for anybody else, but I assume that the conscious mind creates perspectives which are a distraction. But in fact, there is no conscious mind and there is no distraction.
Yeah, right.
And so it's all actually back down to square one.
Yeah.
Or one thing.
Yeah.
But we think it's our mind who's doing this to us. But
yeah. But that's more smoke and mirrors. There's nothing there.
Absolutely. So any structure that you get that describes what's going on is inaccurate.
Yeah, exactly. Because what's actually happening is undescribable. It's intrinsically undescribable. It's not undescribable theoretically. It's actually impalpably and immediately undescribable. And in fact, you have to jump through hoops of bullshit to actually pretend you've accurately described anything. No, it is that. That's the whole story.
But the bullshit's also the same thing.
Of course it is, sure.
There is only one thing.
Yeah. Well, it's like, I mean, in the example I was giving of the artwork with the found arts with this one perspective where it all lines up. Perspective and the other perspectives they're all there. It's not that the one isn't there, but it has no primacy. It has no.
But unless the artist gives you a little frame to look through,
right,
you might never find it.
Right, exactly, yeah. But unfortunately, in the spiritual dilemma, it's exactly the opposite. Yes. You feel like you're stuck in the frame.
When you say things are infinite, sometimes in my mind automatically thinks of a uncountable number of things, but you're pointing more towards the fact that there's no boundaries to anything, and that's the infiniteness.
Yeah, nothing is one way or another way. You look at any experience, and no matter how can always find more dimensions, more perspective. I mean, think of people. Think of a person. Like, who are they like? You look at them and say, people have very distinct flavors. You look at someone, you feel their flavor, and yeah, that's they feels like that. But on the other hand, if I wanted to say, okay, and exactly what is that they feels like? It's whoa. I mean, it's like it is exactly a lay flavor, but you can't. But that it doesn't have. It's not like, oh, that's exactly this, and it's not. It's not like that. It's just it's an infinite universe of things that all come together as that. And so specificity and infinity are not contraries.
Right, that's a resonant, life is a resonant mode of infinity.
Right, exactly. And it's not just the resonant, it's
Yeah, no, I know.
every point of view, every perspective is true. And every perspective gives a different readout from every other perspective,
Right,
but they're each of infinity.
right,
And it's not like the infinity dissolves the specificity, or the
right,
specificity is in conflict with the infinity. They're both the same thing,
right.
which is why it's so weird for the rational mind to try and wrap its head around.
Well, could
Because
you
it wants to turn it into either or. Either it's pattern or it's infinite.
Right.
No, it's an infinity that is presenting as a very specific pattern.
Right.
But that's how it is. It's not a linear logic. It's not a simplistic either or logic.
Yeah, I was just thinking of the infinity, the definition of infinity. I mean, could you just plug in like miraculous for infinity as another way to say it? I mean, there's no way to know what this stuff is.
Well, infinite, verbally, semantically, has a very specific meaning. It means without end.
Right.
You come to an end. You can't exhaust it. You can't get to the bottom of it. You can look at any phenomena, and you can't. The quantity and quality and everything of the information which is present, you can never get to the. It's not like, okay, now I know everything there is to know exactly what that is. It is exactly what it is, but it's bottomless.
Right.
And I could spend the rest of my life looking at that bowl, and I would continually be having different experiences.
Sure.
Yeah.
So experiences are, you could say they are made up of let's say resonant modes, but those themselves are infinite.
Yeah.
In nature, the mode
Yeah.
itself.
A resonant mode is just a dominant, a seeming, a dominant.
Looking, it looks different, and it looks different.
Sure.
However you move around it.
Yeah. And each perspective is a resonant mode, but when you look at what's there, it opens to infinity.
Right.
It's weird to talk about, because we talk about it as if it's resonant modes and infinity, but it's not really like that.
Right. Well, yeah, because the resonant mode is an expression of everything.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I mean, a good way to, a good way. One way to put it is just in terms of seemings. Infinity can seem to be all sorts of different ways. There's no official version of what infinity is supposed to look like.
Right.
Infinity can look like that, and look like that, and look like that, and look like this, and look like, my thoughts, and look like this, and look like that. And when I look at any one of those things, I in fact find infinity.
Right.
But it looks like that.
Right. And how can we actually say it's an infinite how can we actually say it's infinite? I mean, I can say it's miraculous. I know, it's a complete mystery to me. But infinity sort of means there's no end to the thing.
Right. That's the same way as saying you can't know what it is. You can't get to the end of knowing what it is.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
it's not like I know everything there is to know about it. You can never get to that point.
Right.
And not just cumulative, not by there's this and there's that and there's this and there's that.
Right.
You never get to an end of that. But just in the instant, even in the instant, you can't get to the end of. But so I'm seeing that bowl. I'm seeing exactly that bowl. What is it I'm seeing? I can't possibly say.
Yeah, right.
There's no final word, because it's exactly that, but it's.
What is that?
Yeah. There's no. I can't like draw a set of. It's all of this, and no more and no less, and that's what it is.
Right. Yeah.
So that's the sense. That's the sense of that without end, en fin.
Right.
There's no end to it. It's what it is.
Right. Yeah.
Even while it is exactly what it is.
Right. So that's the sort of that's where sort of miraculous and infinity kind of come together.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all. I mean, they're the same thing. It's just a matter of they have slightly different semantic spins.
Right, yeah.
But the flavor of it is exactly the same.
Yeah, because I've been trying to grab a hold of things in terms of infinity. And it's like, how do I know that they're actually infinite? I don't. It sort of has a numerical flavor to it.
Yeah, that's a oversimplification of what infinite means. What I'm trying to say about it. It's open ended. You can't say what it is.
As to
You can't unresolvable. Yeah,
unresolvable.
you can't pin it down.
Yeah.
You can say this is infinite. If you don't know if it's infinite, there is nothing but infinite.
Yeah, there's nothing but nothing is resolvable. Nothing.
Right.
Everything is exactly what it is. But having said that, you can't say anything more authoritative than that.
Yeah.
You can't actually add to that without bullshitting.
Yeah, right. I mean, if we say everything's unknowable and miraculous, it's almost the same thing. In my mind.
Absolutely. It's just it's totally the same thing. But it's just a matter of, these are all just different ways of looking at it in terms of different specificities.
Yeah.
But you end up with the same thing.
Right.
And it's not important. None of these particularities are important. Important is to get to the fact itself.
Yeah.
It's not, I mean, this way of putting it or that way of putting it is all wrong anyway. So because it can't be put. So
Right.
it's pointless trying to split hairs about these various things.
Yeah.
They're only useful to the extent they are. And if they are, screw them.
Yeah, right. Well, I'm getting too heavy-handed about it.
It's just a convenient, jumping.
Right. Yeah, I mean, even the whole idea of your sucky life, I mean, wow.
Yeah. Prove it. Find it.
Well, yeah.
Where do you find? Where do I look to find my life?
Well, even if you could find it, I mean, like, whoa.
Oh.
Check that out. I mean, that's as far as you can get. Right?
Yeah, you can't. If you really look, you can't get past endless weirdness.
Right. Yeah.
You can find endless weirdness. You can't really find sucky.
It's funny. I was fooling around with some pain I was having the other night, and it's weird. It was like I was eating it. It just disappeared immediately, and I was looking at it in terms of like, it's just something that comes, but it's gone before.
Yeah.
It's just constant. It's like
Sure.
I'm eating it. I'm eating all these experiences, and
Yeah.
they're coming through and saying something, but they're not. They're changing all the time. And
Yeah. You can't find anything. You can't find it. It doesn't have any identity. It doesn't have any stable identity.
Yeah.
I mean, pain is a really good example because it seems so demandingly to be something.
Yeah.
But then you go looking at what it is, and it's so slippery. It's so it's there, and then you look at it a certain way, and it's actually completely gone, and then it's there again, and it's like the whole thing is it's really obvious. You're not negating the phenomenon, but you're looking at how non-linear it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's whatever the feeling was, just keeps disappearing into the past.
Yeah.
Then I was thinking when I was feeling it, I was thinking, well, maybe I'll just put my attention over to that corner up there in the room while there and see if it still exists. There's all sorts of things you can do about it.
Oh yeah, man. Infinite dimensions. Infinite dimensions. An interesting thing to do if you've never done it. I did it when I was a teenager because it was kind of curious to me. I should say I was curious about it. Is play with hypnosis, and you can hypnotize yourself. You can like feel like you're sinking into darkness or these kinds of things, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy where you suggest these things, and all of a sudden everything changes. You can put yourself in all these extreme subjects
right.
that shift very much from each other. You know?
Yeah.
And you know, you can put yourself in a perspective where you can't see with your eyes. You can put yourself in a perspective where you're sort of in the deep sleep state, but not but awake. You know,
Oh, yeah,
you can
right.
do all these things just by kind of
Yeah.
telling yourself you're doing it, telling yourself you lie down, can relax, and tell yourself you're going there, and you kind of do.
Yeah, right.
And you know, just that kind of experiment really clearly conveys the flexibility of all of these experiential perspectives.
So how do you get out of that?
Well, you're never
So
actually,
hypnosis is
you're never actually in it, so it was like everything else, it just sort of morphs.
There's no way to tell them.
Yeah. Yeah.
You go to where it came from.
Yeah.
It's just like this.
Yeah.
It's always there. Never reveals
Yeah,
itself.
yeah. Nothing is actually anything in particular. All these particulars actually aren't. You try and pin it down. It was. It's not getting power, just a sec.
Yes, lost me.
Plug into it again. Now that's on. Why isn't this on? And that's on.
Pam says she's got reception.
Yeah, the computer's been running, but it's been running on its battery. The plug wasn't, this power strip wasn't turned on. Technical difficulties, sorry. We're stuck in this samsara and cause and effect. We would be if we were.
So, this, you know, you could say anything, but when you find yourself thinking, that's an indication that you're in a conscious mind.
Not necessarily, because the conscious mind doesn't actually think. The unconscious mind does everything. The conscious mind pretends to itself to exist. It defines itself into existence based on raw material of the unconscious, you might say.
I didn't know.
By defining.
It's a watcher.
Yeah, it's a
Just
watcher,
watching.
and it's a spin doctor too. Spin doctors. But what is spin doctoring is phenomena of the unconscious mind. So the unconscious mind has all this energy in the dimension, let's call it, that, you know, surges with its own intrinsic dynamism and spontaneity. And the conscious mind turns it and says, oh, I'm thinking, and owns them and claims it and defines it as thought, and then defines the thoughts as being about this or that.
So the unconscious doesn't watch.
Yes, it does watch. The conscious doesn't actually watch. The unconscious is the only one that actually sees your experience. The unconscious is you. The conscious mind pretends to be you. You know what the unconscious mind, you know what the conscious mind is like? It's like a marionette.
The unconscious.
The conscious is like a marionette. The marionette's never actually there. The only one there is the puppeteer. But the marionette can pretend to be there. And it looks, and if you look at it from its perspective out in front of this puppet show, it looks as if it's actually there, dancing around and doing stuff. And best not to try and figure it out.
The unconscious mind is pulling the strings.
Yeah, it does everything. That's the only thing that's actually there.
So,
It doesn't think it is. Its idea of crappy and the conscious mind's idea of crappy are two different universes. It thinks weirdness, pain, and suffering is just hunky-dory. What fun flavors to play with. Disease. Great. Let's get into some of that. It's really interesting, really juicy.
But joy and ecstasy are also. So.
Absolutely. And the unconscious mind is quite happy to play with those too.
okay, so it's not necessarily thinking, it's interpreting.
Yes, it's a spin doctor.
It's spin doctor.
Spin doctor. These energy events occur, and then the conscious mind says, oh, that was this, and that's that. The energy events are just energy events. They don't say they're anything.
Well, okay, it was say the mind, or I guess that's the conscious mind, puts all this disparate information together in a kind of way that makes sense of it. Or
Yes.
Makes it possible to interact with people or
Yes and no.
energy.
Yes and no. The conscious mind does a lot of it, but the unconscious mind does a lot of it too. The unconscious mind is quite happy working with interpretive frameworks, but it knows that they're just play acting. Whereas the conscious mind thinks it's for real. The conscious mind thinks, oh, I am here and I'm talking to other people, so I better, or pull my pants down or, whatever. The unconscious mind, would be quite happy doing that. But it's also quite happy exploring these other interface modes at its convenience. I know, right? Well, some people don't.
Your unconscious mind in check. This for tonight.
But the unconscious mind it keeps itself in check by playing these games with itself, and it lets itself play its games. And sometimes it'll break its own rules, but sometimes it won't. Whereas the conscious mind doesn't think of it as games at all. The conscious mind thinks it's for real, and it's this way, or and if it's not that way, oh my God, what a disaster!
Sounds like there's some kind of insight that sees and knows that.
Sure.
The way you're describing that, to me, says that you've seen something. Can just.
Well, I am that. You are too. It's just a matter of seeing from the perspective, from the true perspective.
Yeah. Back to something that's a little more than just square one.
No, it's not more. You're always seeing from the true perspective. That is square one. All of this conscious mind and interpretive frameworks is piled on top of square one without ever actually leaving square one. It's pretended complication. And so getting back to square one is dropping to the fundamental perspective rather than these elaborated, developed perspectives. And the fundamental perspective is not, can see these elaborated perspectives and has no problem with them because they were always it anyway. But the elaborated perspectives can't see the fundamental perspective because they're too precarious. They're too dependent upon their own internal logic. They can't violate their own logic. The unconscious mind perspective is quite happy violating its own logic. Breaking rules is its mode. I mean, you know, we're putting it in these sort of pseudo-psychological terms, but it's basically the same thing we always talk about. Realization, delusion is being stuck in a conscious perspective, thinking that you are something that you think you are. And realization is the true perspective of what this actually is, which is a field of experience which is only unconscious minded. It's an interactive, participatory field of experience, let's say, in some senses, perhaps. And that's what realization is.
And you can know where you are.
Of course. You do know where you are. You already do. You just, if you're in delusion to any extent, you've just forgotten it by being sucked into the conscious mind spin doctor, and insisting on putting it this way or that way. But as you put it, it is square one. So you of course you know where you are. It's where you've always been. And noticing is letting yourself consciously participate with the experience from that perspective. Just being with the presence of something, you know, color, light, anything, sound, thought, and just any energy presence that just is, without being this or that, just an is, and bang. And that's what it really is. And it never isn't that, even when it's being interpreted. It's always that. The interpretation is just sort of piled on top of that.
So the feeling of I,
The feeling,
yeah,
but the feeling of I is actually this. The real I is actually the same as this. An I that's a somehow separate or precarious, like an I that is separate from some this, is not the real I. The real I is I am here, which is completely synonymous with this is here. That's the real I. And it's absolutely genuine. I mean, the feeling that you are is for real. You're real. That's transcendental right there.
so the interpretation that that's an I is an
If it's an I and that means to some non-I, or compared to it's an I that is this, that, or the other, then that's just sort of piled on top of the actual I as claims. But the claims don't actually inhibit or in any way even address the actuality. They're just sort of floating there in the air, pretending to have something to do with it. It's like a sign. It's like a label on a caption on a picture. You can put any caption you want on any picture. It doesn't change what's in the picture. But it can seem to if you let yourself get sucked into it.
We're very skilled at putting captions.
We're very skilled at putting in captions, and we're very skilled at getting sucked into them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, spin doctoring works, you know. But when you see the mechanism, then it doesn't have to work. You don't have to be stuck in it.
until you see it. If you don't see it, you stop.
Maybe, yeah. Sure. But it's completely obvious. When you see this, a picture with a caption is a really good example, actually. Because a picture is what? It's just what it is. You know, and you can say all kinds of, oh, it's a picture of a person, or oh, it's a scene, or oh, it's a moment in someone's history, or oh, it's a collection of, you know, colors, or oh, it's this, or oh, it's that. And yeah, all of that. You can see it as that. But it's open-ended. The caption, you know, President Obama, you know, expresses regret at such, you know, it's like bullshit. It's a pattern of colors. It's a weird collage of amazing textures, or whatever.
The totality doctrine, too.
Yeah, it's very paradoxical because it's quite happy playing with these pseudo partial modes because it knows it does not. It's a fun game for it. It's like an exploration. It's like, okay, cool, that sounds like fun. I'll pretend to be somebody. From its point of view, from its point of view, it knows it's not actually anybody, so it's not losing anything. It's like playing Monopoly. You know you're not really the little hat or the shoe rolling around a board, gaining and losing money. You know you're not really that, but you can pretend you are, and it can be fun. So that's like from the unconsciousness perspective. It's like, oh, want to play a game? Okay, cool. Let's spend a lifetime pretending to be a human being. Oh, that sounds like fun.
Right.
And it doesn't give a shit because it lives beyond space and time, and it knows it's not going to anything, and so it's all a lark from its perspective.
Yeah, right.
But then the human perspective, if the human perspective claims to actually, wait a minute, I exist, I'm real, I'm really here. It's like, yeah, no, you're not. You're
real disengagement from the feeling and awareness of the presence of this.
It can seem to be, and it's not. It's paradoxically, it's not actually, but it can seem to be. You never actually lose reality, but you can seem to, which is that's always the paradox. Realize people always say, "I was always realized." Everyone's realized. Nothing happened. You get realized and nothing happened. It's like, okay, same old, same old. but paradoxically, unrealized people don't know that. It's like they're stuck in hypnosis. I don't know. I mean, the whole phenomena is very bizarre. But pragmatically, it happens that it is possible to experience this directly, and doing so is powerful. It's the whole noticing scam.
Seems to me there's an analogy here. A 2-year-old child living in Kensington doesn't know it's an American.
Cool.
But it is an American, and being an American has all sorts of implications. The child is completely oblivious.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems to be the same as the unconscious mind is. Maybe it doesn't work.
It's all good.
Yeah, it makes sense. Okay, so the obliviousness of the 2-year-old is like the conscious mind. The 2-year-old is going along, gaining the benefit of being without knowing.
Yeah, that's true. If you reverse your analogy, then it works well. Because it's true. The unconscious mind always has certain inherent, we call it rights, or just potentialities due to its nature. It is in time. It's invulnerable. It's independent of anything. It's a miraculously transcendentally existing bubble of reality that is independent of everything, and it knows it. So it has those inalienable, rights, qualities just due to its nature. And yet it can seem to be, but it doesn't lose those rights just because it's ignorant of them. Just because it thinks it's vulnerable and thinks it's dependent and thinks it's stuck with things, it doesn't actually ever become that.
But the analogy breaks down because all of those things that these inalienable rights don't actually mean anything.
Sure. Well, all analogies break down. So analogies are partial conveniences at best. They're never true. Truth can't be said. Technically, it's break time. I don't know if we want to have a break. Let's take a break. Take a break. Okay. All you throngs of people at home, go have a pee. have some tea or crack open a tall cool one or light up a bowl, and we'll be back in about 10 or 15 minutes. I'm going to leave the video streaming, so if you're watching this after the fact, you might want to fast forward about 10 minutes.
You can turn it around.
Yeah, why not?
No.
Not that way. I'll turn it around this way.
I don't think you want to see.
Yeah.
Safe does.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you're shy people.
Like a holiday. You don't have to make a main dish unless you need mixture. Just turkey. And I'll make mashed potatoes just because I'm make gravy. So anything that you go with that.
Did you, John, did you park in front of behind Pam's car? Is that your car?
Yeah.
Sure.
And then I took it.
No, the tenant
No, you
pulls in
haven't.
right next to him now.
Yeah.
I did.
I put something on the garage saying this is a tenant space. So nobody's pulled up next to
And
it.
how do you feel?
I took a good look at it. She does have a big SUV, but
I
I
was
think she can
thinking
get
about
through
maybe
there.
something
Behind you.
I think it's something good.
I
Yeah,
thought about
yeah.
second, I decided not to.
It's a little tight. I'm sure she can.
I think
It's a little girl, you gotta be careful.
Cornbread.
But not the
Some
end.
gluten-free
She has a big SUV.
Okay.
There's some corn.
Yeah,
Well,
Yeah.
it is. Or just make something up next week.
Well, yeah.
Potatoes are so good.
What is it?
Sweet potatoes are nice.
Mhm.
I was thinking of, I'm trying to find some organic cranberries or something. Like these cranberry sauce, but something.
Yeah, cranberry sauce, that's a good idea.
Isn't good? I love cranberry. I
Me
did.
too.
I did.
So
this-
easy to make.
Yeah, or just.
Oh, yeah.
I know
Well,
what's right.
Boil them
Better
up.
than xylitol is coconut sugar because it doesn't accrue blood
I
sugar.
don't know.
It does?
Yeah.
Well, then,
Interesting is that.
I tried maple, grade B maple syrup, even grade B. What's in
I think I've tried all of them.
Yeah.
I don't know.
it?
I love maple syrup. Like
Everybody's different.
maple syrup with a latte.
Those were the days.
Those were the days. That was the best. Maple syrup and latte. Well, I did all of the stuffing, and then it was like stuffing with yogurt, and so the next night I thought stuffing with sausage would be really good.
They look like that. That's very southern.
Yeah. And then I found the best was mixing the sausage with cranberry sauce. I mean, really, that was.
There's family recipes. Yellow squash, onions, and sausage that and add stuffing, mix. And he bakes it. Oh, and cheese, of course.
And cheese.
And, you know, it's really good if you like that
I like that kind of
kind of stuff. Pretty cheese. He loves that, but he'll probably be too busy making chai to do that.
Is there actually going to be satsang?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, there is. Okay. At 4, so.
But not at 4. It'll be later.
Say again, it'll be.
It won't be right at 4.
Oh,
I don't know,
it's
ask
going to
Peter.
be eating and entertaining.
Well, it's more like a party.
And then regular stuff.
I mean, it's up to Peter what he wants to do. Peter, on Sunday, we're starting at 4, but we're just gonna do 1 o'clock right at 6.
Yeah, Billy, whatever you want to do.
Yeah, okay.
I'm not thinking of it as mainly just a Christmas party, and then we'll see
Yeah.
what happens. If
All right.
if people want to
That's
do
what I thought.
It's a chance to
People
eat
wanna-
and drink. And
Chance to
Yeah,
eat.
if people want to
Yeah.
dive into anything else, I don't give a shit. All good. All the same with me.
It's the same to me.
Yeah.
So not here.
So,
But I think that may be just here until it drops.
Yeah, or not.
And this is fun. I love hearing about autumnal.
in Calistoga, and you know how they have those closures outside of stores?
Oh, yeah.
See, look, so this was hanging like in the very evening, like $20.
Oh, good.
$20. And I ran right in and bought it.
Yeah, so we're in Calistoga recently?
Yeah, last weekend we went for Thanksgiving. We were there 4 days for the harvest.
Oh, yeah, I mean, it's a great time. Was the changing of the leaves like all over? Is that
Oh, all over the place. So you're off your all salad diet.
Um, also, I sure love lamb though. God, you guys would let me know if I'm like eating lamb. Would you let me know? Yeah, yeah. I'm just eating so much of it. I just can't imagine. I'm loving it.
Lamb's supposed to be really. They can't do too much nasty things to it.
Yeah, and in New Zealand stuff. It's just
Pretty.
Where'd you buy your lamb?
Whole Foods normally.
No, Bell Campo.
They don't do, well, the deal with Bill Campo is they got really expensive. Because there was such a shortage on, it was with a drought or something, and to have them be 100% grass-fed. So I just noticed that I was enjoying my whole food stuff and paying a lot less.
It's back at home, meat store.
Yeah, it's a fabulous master. Yeah. Yeah, it is, and in fact, if you were to chicken or something like that, I mean, they're,
Oh, it's not from all the way from the mountain.
no, I just got off the plane at Oakland Airport, I rented a car and came over here.
Good.
Stopped at Whole Foods. Yes.
Was traffic horrible or not too bad?
No, it was, it was,
Was it raining or?
it was raining, it was a bit.
The freeway was open.
Freeway, yeah, nothing was even closed off, or is that what
It
you had?
has been closed off
Oh,
for the
has
last
it
3
closed?
months.
Oh, really? Because of,
Demonstrations.
oh, tell me, what's been going on? Demonstrations?
Berkeley.
Berkeley people have been rioting against police brutality, and the whole freeway for 3 months running.
What sort of police brutality?
People who get, shot and strangled and all around the country.
Well, did anybody else know about this but me?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, well,
Only people who stay in touch with the news.
yeah. Well, but I mean, did you know that when you were living there?
No, it's only been the last 3 nights.
Well, would it have had to have been a while to lead up to the last 3 nights?
Well, this particular incident is coming to a head because there's been a few particular incidences that have been very popularized in the media, and people are getting,
A guy got shot in Ferguson.
that started the whole thing.
And then
But remedial history for Suzanne is probably a little outside the
okay,
scope
there was a Declaration of Independence.
So there's the Big Bang first.
Okay. No, but somebody got shot, an innocent black man got shot, and there were riots. And those spread around the country. And then
Oh,
somebody
no, I'm not,
and
yeah.
then somebody got choked to death in New York.
Some black man.
Some black man got choked to death by a white policeman in an illegal chokehold, and that sparked more riots. And then kids have been shot, and one thing and another.
It's business as usual, but there's been a kind of a media flurry about it, and people are reacting, and there's a flurry, and so it's all just sort of spinning out.
So this isn't necessarily a reaction solely to what's been happening in Berkeley. It's
No.
a reaction.
No, it's Berkeley and New York and San Francisco have all had demonstrations about this police brutality. And
It's an
in
issue that has
Berkeley, it
several
got
instances.
out of hand somewhat because they started breaking bank windows and Walgreens windows and the police were particularly brutal and they used rubber bullets and they brought out their tanks and tear gas and all that stuff on the streets of Berkeley over the last week. And so people are
Best to just stay home. Don't bother
I
yourself.
wasn't hearing about it in Southern California, you know, there's.
Don't bother yourself about it.
Don't think about it.
And yeah, so the latest thing is to block the 80 freeway. And they blocked it for 2 hours last night. And if you can avoid going down the 80 tonight, I would suggest you do it.
Hopefully they won't be blocking the Richmond Bridge. You didn't hear that. You didn't hear that. Any demonstrators out there.
I was hoping the rain would.
Well, whatever. Anyway, why don't we reconvene? Current events.
Yeah.
Current events 101.
It's kind of shocking.
Oh, Berkeley is a powder keg.
It doesn't usually get that well, does it?
No, not usually that explicit, but the attitude's there.
Yeah.
People usually aren't focused enough to actually do much about it, other than sort of random insanity. For them to all act more or less in concert is a rare thing. Anyway, we're back.
So this was my vision of this unconscious stuff before, and my vision was we're all walking around completely realized, seeing everything. It doesn't really matter if our conscious mind never figures that out or not.
Right.
Sometimes the conscious subsides into the unconscious, and then you see clearly, other times.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much it.
Yeah. No. What happens is the center of gravity. I think what happens in terms of this particular analogy, or metaphor, whatever the hell it is, the center of gravity of what you feel like you are shifts from the conscious mind and settles into the unconscious mind. The phenomenon doesn't change at all. The conscious mind is still there, and thoughts still occur, personas are still happening, and all that stuff. But it doesn't. It feels very different from the perspective of the unconscious. And so, noticing, in essence, is a technique of training the sort of the conscious sense of self to settle down into the unconscious, out of the conscious. But it doesn't change the actual phenomena at all.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter in the least.
Whatever needs to be experienced is being experienced anyway.
Oh yeah. And the only point in trying to do all this, if assuming that there is such a thing as free will and deliberate choice and all that, which is opening a whole can of worms. We're going to skip over that. At any rate, assuming that you can choose to do something, the only reason to actually engage in any of this spiritual fold at all is that it turns out that the perspective of the unconscious mind has a lot of significant perks compared to the perspective of the conscious mind. Yeah, the unconscious mind is a pure hedonist. It knows it's invulnerable. It knows it's eternal. It doesn't give a shit about anything. And that's kind of a nice home base to be hanging out in, rather than the precarious, delicate, neurotic participating and defending everything, and things seem to be a big problem, and so on and so forth. And the unconscious mind is also the perspective where it's a cake and eat it too situation, because the unconscious mind gets to participate in all these other levels, but it still retains its fundamental perspective. And so realization is nothing other than having a sense of self, sense of what this is, what's going on here, in the unconscious perspective rather than the conscious perspective, in terms of that metaphor. Framework.
The unconscious has no fear,
Yeah.
no anxiety,
Yeah.
no happiness,
Yeah.
no anything.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't.
But it's very juicy.
It's very.
Significant.
It doesn't need to go anywhere to get anything.
No,
Because
it's just swimming in its
it's
modes.
just swimming in awesomeness.
Yeah, you can take it, if you want a particularly gross analogy, you can imagine the perspective of the unconscious mind is a bacteria living in the large colon or something. It's just swimming in shit. Couldn't be happier. Nothing to gain, nothing to lose. All these wonderful, rich qualities. How's that for a selling point?
That's pretty good.
It's a bush jacket, right?
Yeah.
There's an awful lot coming back from that one.
Yeah.
People implants
It's
and all that.
it's pretty true though. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
It's a pretty good analogy in some ways.
Well, I wrote a quote of yours on a sticky and I stuck it on my wallet where it counts.
Wow,
And weirdness morphing into weirdness, that's it.
that's it. You said it all. That's the unconscious perspective right there. And the unconscious loves weirdness. So weirdness and morphing into weirdness is gravy. It's like, oh yeah, baby, bring it.
If there's inviolability,
If there's what?
inviolability.
Yeah.
And
Well, there
if
is.
if there isn't,
Right.
then
But if there seems to be that there isn't, that is just a conscious perspective. Because in actuality there is.
but that conscious perspective is causing all this.
Yeah. It's inaccurate.
It's still running the show.
It's not running the show. It claims to run the show.
It causes this victimhood of the body.
It claims to. The body, from the body's perspective, it isn't. The body's not a conscious phenomenon. The body's a phenomenon of the unconscious, and so it's not a victim at all. The body is just this amazing, multifaceted joy factory, or let's just say quality factory. It's a rainbow. It's a rainbow of qualities.
That inviolability requires a pure knowing of that
Yes,
without any qualification whatsoever.
absolutely.
And either you've got it or you don't have it.
Sure. But that perspective, that certainty is through noticing.
And there's no requiring it, there's no goal.
Yeah. And noticing there's no noticing gives that without gives the upside of that without any downside. And noticing turns out to be all that's ever actually happening anyway. Because noticing is just a euphemism for the in terms of tonight's metaphor du jour.
Isn't it happening with both?
Which it?
Noticing.
Noticing,
No,
what makes
okay,
noticing
alright.
actually noticing is the unconscious perspective becoming apparent.
Okay.
Noticing can start with and have its jumping off point of a conscious perspective. So I can be sitting here worrying about my taxes or something. Okay, that can happen, but then if noticing becomes in kicking into gear in that context, all of a sudden it becomes a weird energy presence in the context of other weird energy wow factor. And as soon as there's wow factor, there's no particular anything because it's not dependent upon anything. Wow factor doesn't come from anything. It just is. Isness doesn't come from anything. That's where inviolability comes from. Isness is not actually a delicate following from something that needs to be preserved. Isness just is. It's free energy. What's that?
I forgot that.
It's okay. Forgetting it isn't losing anything, and remembering it isn't gaining anything. It's just shifting around in perspectives.
When you have a lucid dream, and you also wake up in the middle of a dream, that's like dropping into the unconscious. Because you say,
Sure.
see, there's no implications of what you're dreaming.
Sure. Because the equivalent of a conscious mind in the dream state is a definition that the dream is some interpretive framework of something's happening.
Yeah.
And when you go lucid, it's not. You can still have the access to that. Yeah, I get that. I thought I was here, and I thought I was with these people, and I thought such and such was happening. But it's not really like that. I.e., you undercut that interpretive framework, but without necessarily eliminating or canceling it, because it's irrelevant. It's not about eliminating interpretive frameworks. It's about seeing their arbitrariness and partiality. And then you undercut it to the actual perspective of inconceivable energy presence, of isness, which is all that ever is here anyway.
Oh my God, it's a dream.
Yeah.
It's isness that's the real man.
Yeah.
Isness is everything.
Yeah. Literally. Isness is everything, and everything is isness. Isness just happens to have a weird proclivity of showing up with all this intensely apparent patterning, which is potentially interpretable in various ways. Of course, it doesn't matter. And that's it. By George, I think she's coming.
Giving up on that one.
Never fear. Easy come, easy go.
You can't hurt with the sword. I mean, nothing can do anything to isness.
Yeah, try and turn isness off. Try and stop isness. Try and damage it. Try and increase isness or try and diminish isness. And you can't find isness. Just shows up with all this amazing flavors. Flavors of color and light and sound and all, but it's all just isness.
This is the primary miracle.
It's the only miracle. Isness is, and nothing else is.
Yeah, right.
The only thing that is, and nothing but.
I mean,
All
the fact
is
that it
all
can
the
be here
time.
is like, wow, I can't
Yeah.
believe this.
Yeah, how can that happen? Try and make sense out of that. Well, you see, it's simple. Reality occurs because. See, there was this big bang which appeared out of nothing. Funnily enough, funny thing happened on the way 15 billion years ago.
Yeah.
On the way from nowhere to nowhere, all of a sudden there was everything. A likely story.
Well, we actually don't really know. I mean, what can say?
Don't know anything.
Knowing is an illusion. Well, what,
Yeah.
what knows?
Yeah. No.
You can say that. You can say anything.
Doesn't make any sense.
You know it. You know.
You know knowing by knowing, and knowing knows knowing by knowing knowing.
Yeah.
No?
Knowing.
You can't say that. No. You
But knowing is just a euphemism for is.
can't.
So you haven't actually added anything to the equation.
Well, I mean, we know that now, business is now, but I mean, it's like scientists have been trying to find out the beginning of that. And the spiritualists say there was no beginning. We can't really say one way or the other. We don't know that.
Well, sure. You look at now.
Except
If there's a beginning, the beginning has to happen now, and now has no beginning and no end. Now has those qualities just don't apply. It's not that it's not that. It's that they just don't. You know, it's that like asking, you know, how yellow is a fart. You know, it's apples and oranges. They have nothing to do with each other. Yeah, that was, I don't know where that came from. I'll blame it on my unconscious.
It's good, we can remember it better that way.
You know, it has no duration, but it has, isness has no duration, but it has no non-duration. The qualities of notions of durationality just don't apply. You know, it has no beginning, it has no ending, but it has the opposite of those either. So those qualities just don't apply. It is the way it is, and it's not in terms of being any one way or another way. You know, and when we generate these interpretive frameworks, we like to pretend it is. We basically imagine there's a beginning, and a middle, and a duration, and an ending. And suppose phenomena have a beginning, a middle, and an end, which is completely contrary to the evidence. The only evidence is, and is doesn't come into being, is doesn't go out of being. Is, you can't say is, you can't even say is. Because it doesn't even apply to itself. It's just, it's an entirely monopolar notion. It has no correlative, it has no context.
well, we only know that, but also we only know that from the mind and the body.
Where's this from?
And they enables us to know that. And
To know which?
experience business.
Where do you get that? That's a theory.
How-
Minds and bodies exist, or is just isness. It's just spin doctrine of isness. You haven't added anything to the minds and bodies. On the contrary, mind and bodies depend on isness. If there was no isness, how could there be minds or bodies? It's not like minds and bodies come into existence and then because of that there's isness.
There might be isness, and the way isness can be known.
Isness is known by isness. Isness is known by ising isness. But the word knowing or known is just a euphemism for isness. It's a more theory. The theory is that, well, if something is known, there's a knower and a known and a knowing. You know, that's just logic.
Yeah.
When you look at the isness, all of that comes without necessarily being that. It can be seen as that. There's no you know, inherent necessity that it actually is that. It looks as if it was, isness looks as if it was seen. It looks as if it was seeing itself or something. But you know, when you're looking at it, you can't. All you find is isness. Doesn't have parts. Doesn't have poles. It doesn't have a subjective pole and an objective pole. The subjective is no more or less is than the objective. You know, the seer, the meanness, the perspective is no less, more or less is than, you know, a chair or a light or you know, a front door appearing in the sensorially. You know, it's imagined that there are different degrees of some range of some spectrum, but in actuality, it's just this here that happens to be describable as if it was like that. Again, think of a dream. A dream looks as if there's someone seeing and something being seen. It looks as if it's like that, but there's actually nothing being seen. There's nothing there. There's no objective pole there, even though it appears to be, and there's no subjective pole. There's just the presence of the dreaming, which is the isness, which is just another. Which what isness looks like when you're dreaming. It's like a dream. Like when you're awake, isness looks like. Yeah. But it hasn't. It's not any different isness. It never becomes any more. It's not like there's isness, and so then there's this, that, and the other. This, that, and the other just turn out to be claims that are made about isness. Oh, isness generates a subject and object and complex different. Is it really? It's describable in those terms, but does it have to be described in those terms?
This is why I enjoyed that Interstellar movie. Went into all sorts of different dimensions.
Yeah.
And it was a way to, well, they use it as a way to visualize this from different perspectives that we don't usually have.
Yeah.
And it was always this. It was never something other than this.
Sure. You know, that was fun.
But there was, they could go to 8 dimensions and still only 8 dimensions of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when he was in the black hole and it was his daughter in her room, it was the same thing.
Yeah.
So you really hole somewhere. And what's the difference anyway? Yeah.
You know, from our experience.
No from.
Well, as our
Well, there's no as because there's no separate than the experience.
experience. Just what, no?
There's no this as experience. What would be an as implies a conjunction between two things. So there's experience, and there's knowing that there's experience, and experience is the knowing that there's experience, because that's what experience is. Isness is the knowing of isness. Right? It looks like that anyway.
But then the other-
Sure. Anything can be true. It can be described as in any way, but it never becomes more or less of itself. You've heard me say over and over, it can look like anything, but it never departs from itself.
Business is so totally dynamic too all the time. Sometimes you can just check into the dynamism of the thing.
It's absolutely spontaneous dynamism, sure. And that's one of the basic modes in Kashmir Shaivism, is you just feel this dynamism and wow, bang.
Yeah,
That's because that's nothing other than this.
oh, that's
So
right.
that goes right to Shiva, goes right to the isness.
Right, that's right. That's spontaneous.
It's all just code words for the dynamic nature of this.
Sometimes you can feel that isness more, it feels like you can feel it more basically, you know.
And there's infinite perspectives of noticing, of being with it in different ways. It can look like anything, you know. There's
True.
the range of ways that it can seem to present itself is literally infinite.
It's true, yeah. Sometimes you can see it more where it's less disguised. Maybe,
Seems like. But more disguised and less disguised, and more complex and less complex, are just it's tricks because it's always just it.
sure, yeah, absolutely.
When it's completely overcomplicated and entirely alienated and distanced from itself, that's still its very core, its very essence. Never depart.
Right. I don't know, it seems like sometimes you can drop down into the dynamism of it, and you can avoid all the ways you're interpreting it, or you can
Sure.
ignore them slightly and just
Yeah.
stay riding on the dynamism.
Sure. That's more slipping into a more unconscious perspective. Because that's conscious is always just sort of swimming energies. It's just sort of surfing energies,
Yeah,
just like on an absolutely continuous basis. And that's its perspective.
right.
And so you can sort of slip into that more heavy-handedly, more specifically, and then see it like.
Yeah, right. I think I'm guessing that's a Kundalini experience in a certain way. Just hanging out with the dynamism of the thing.
It is Kundalini.
Yeah.
Kundalini.
Right.
If you look at the chakra system upside down, then the unconscious is actually the seventh chakra.
Oh,
And then you come down as you get more and more into the consciousness.
Oh, right, yeah. It's such its own animal. It's so
Yeah, that's why you have to get. There's no point trying to make a map of it or form a model of it, because all that's going to do is gum you up eventually.
Yeah, right.
Whereas that's why noticing is so direct and effective, because you're letting it itself show you what it is, rather than saying, oh, it's like this or it's like that. So you're not having expectations or maps to get in the way. Because it is the way it is, very obviously and nakedly. The trick is just to have the wit to look.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's so inherently interesting.
No, it's endless. It's just it's endless.
Yeah.
Endless. It's just it's the cornucopia. It's just it gives everything. It's an endless flower wall, spontaneously, freely, unstoppably.
More interesting in and of itself. Your conscious mind, you don't give a shit about what your conscious mind is making up.
Oh, yeah.
Even if you have a little thoughts here and there, it's like, oh, that's boring compared to this.
Yeah, its unfoldment gets in its more advanced stages. The yogi just gets more and more careless about who they are and what they're doing. Because it just seems to be such a partial, irrelevant perspective in the face of this explicit lusciousness and fullness.
Yeah. Like a little kid babbling during an opera or something.
Yeah.
Curiosity seems to be a major move.
It's its nature. It's intensely curious about itself. It's intensely self-involved. I mean, you know, we were talking about things like knowing and all of that. That's what that is. That's all just offshoots of its intense self-involvement. It's you could say it's intensely narcissistic. Isness is really wild about isness. With great intensity and investment. You know, and curiosity is just one aspect of that. Curiosity is one aspect of that. Desire is another aspect. Appetites are another aspect. All these kinds of things where it's saying, wow. It's self going, wow.
I remember you saying a few years ago, we were discussing just once and handled more upstream in a certain way. And I was thinking about that tonight, and I was thinking, what you meant by that is you don't, to handle a problem upstream means you don't necessarily see it as a problem.
Yeah, the more inherent mode of being with the energies, sort of surfing your own energies, you're just in that in real time, very amorphously and not definedly. And all apparent circumstances are nothing but that. And if you're with them downstream of, oh, such and such is happening, and what am I going to do, and this and that and the other, and you're sort of parsing it down and breaking it into details and all that, it turns into an enormously complex situation that can be very confusing. But when you're just immediately one-to-one in real time with the energies, then that's what all of that is anyway. And that's the most direct way to be with your situation, because that's all your situation actually is. Turns out that then all the details take care of themselves, you know,
Right.
Better than ever, or certainly as well,
Right.
with a lot less headache.
Right. So with your immediate energies of things as they are, without a lot of concepts about this is that.
Yeah, you're not approaching things by analyzing and then worrying about what to do about those components.
Yeah, it's like driving.
Exactly, just like driving, exactly. If you're driving by thinking about it and sorting it out and thinking about this and that and figuring out what you're going to do, you're going to be a terrible driver. Whereas if you're just with the wheel, with the pedals, and you're there,
Yeah.
then you do everything right without needing to know what you're doing. Even you're just doing it because you're doing it. You're doing the it that it actually is, rather
Yeah.
than all of the complexities that you can analyze it as including.
Yeah, yeah, it's really strange. I mean, everybody has that experience driving. I mean, probably most people.
Well, it's obvious. I mean,
Yeah. I mean,
driving is a really good example of conscious and unconscious mind, because when you're driving well, it drives.
No.
It's the unconscious mind that drives. If the conscious mind starts kicking in and driving, you're going to be fucking up.
Yeah, that's
Or you're liable to be.
or something.
Yeah. Or trying to walk, or trying to dance, or trying to do anything that you can do that's a complex motor skill.
Yeah.
Playing, I mean, I'm musical, so playing an instrument is like that. If I stop and think about what I'm doing, it's like, it's like a train wreck.
Yeah.
But when you just get into being with the energy as the instantaneous dynamism of real time of, it just happens. It just comes together.
Yeah. Funny, I was doing some memorization of some long Sanskrit slokas, and it's like I've said them so often, they're in my mind, and I can say them back, but I don't know how I'm doing it.
No, so the unconscious is doing it.
The unconscious is doing it, and then when you try to consciously go in there and make sure.
Oh, then you get all screwed up.
Yeah, that it really, it's kind of stops the process. I sort of put markers in the conscious way to look at it, but the unconscious can sort of like do it automatically almost. It screws it up every once in a while. And it's kind of funny when you try to marry those two minds.
Yeah.
It's weird.
Because the unconscious does everything and does it skillfully.
Yeah.
But its idea of what's important to do is very different than the unconscious. Than the conscious. The conscious mind thinks you can memorize words and do it wrong or do it right. The unconscious just memorizes and then just, if it deviates, it's like, oh, fuck it, who cares? I don't care, it's all good.
Yeah, true.
And yet it's doing all the doing.
Yeah, it's doing all the doing, that's for sure. I mean, you wonder how it's doing it, how it's doing 50 slokas, and how does it do that?
I mean, that we can integrate incredibly complex functionality, and
yeah. 50 slokas in a different language.
In a different language. They're gibberish.
Yeah, right. They're gibberish language. It's really weird how memory works. I mean, I've been just fooling around with that sometimes. Like if you do a tarot layout and then you sort of go away from it and you try to remember it again, you're not sure which card, there's a card missing, and you try to find out what that card was missing, how to remember what that card was in that position. That is really strange how that happens.
Yeah, because the unconscious is very comfortable with arbitrary flavors. It's like, oh, this is a nice flavor. Let me put that there. Let me put this there. So rather than, it's quite happy with anything. It's like,
I see. Yeah.
Because its basic mode is instantaneous improvisation.
Yeah, right, for sure. Yeah, memory is not its forte in a way.
No, and even when it's a memory that conforms to some kind of rational logic,
Yeah.
it still is. All kinds of sneaks in all kinds of extra flavors and stuff under the table. So even if you remember, you'll be remembering it with a different flavor and different ambiance than previous recollections of the same event.
I know, it's really funny.
But you know, I don't really like the conscious mind, unconscious mind metaphor so much. I mean, it works and it's true, but it has too much baggage. I like the more pristine mode of interpretive frameworks in a context that is wholly, beyond that.
Yeah,
It's a little more, transparent.
Yeah. You keep too balled up in conscious and unconsciousness.
Yeah, I mean, it has too much baggage, and we're so used to, there's so much pop cultural ideas about that.
Yeah.
And it gets into all sorts of baggage of self-identity and psychology and neuroses and all the self-image and all that stuff, which is just,
Yeah.
wading through the shit. But any degree of apparent of internal consistency is generated by an interpretive framework. Actuality has no internal consistency whatsoever.
It's a movie? Oh,
Well, it's consistently what it is. But it has a virtually infinite range of modes of presentation, let's call them.
Opportunities for interpretation.
Yeah, infinite palette of opportunities for interpretation. But interpretation is always sensorial, a hinge of spontaneous, this infinite palette of spontaneous qualities, and selects very carefully a few of them, and then insists on reselecting the same few and only examining those parameters or whatever. So it creates structure by censorship of essentially chaos. It's not necessarily an absolute chaos. It actually has infinite degrees of order in it, but it's so infinite and it may as well be total chaos because its own native internal structural mode is so beyond weird. Infinite fractals inside of infinite fractals with absolute dynamism. But an interpretive framework comes along and says, no, this is this and that's that, and that is not this and this is not that. In the face of this kaleidoscope of continually changing the unique weirdness.
I think the investigation of quantum phenomena kind of influenced thinking that there could be found a kind of ultimate
Wouldn't that be nice?
and
You're an optimist, or is it a pessimist?
The
Tell
people
that-
are still looking for the
Tell that to modern scientists.
People are still saying, who am
People still think there's something to find. You know, but the only actuality that is actually findable is essentially complete unresolvability. So it's not an actuality that is a this or a that is in any particular way. It's an actuality that is essentially no way or any way, or beyond way. So finding it, you can't actually, there's no it that you're finding.
Well, I was thinking of gravity, which is such a powerful force.
Sure. But again, what gravity is doesn't resolve to actually being gravity. You know, and the continued exploration of gravity, if science continues, you know, will continue to reveal that. There'll be ever new paradigms of what it is, and ever new subtle aspects of the way it manifests will show up, and the different forces, the four forces will show to be interactions of each other, and there'll all of a sudden be some, you know, interaction with something else, and then maybe there's some whole other, completely otherness that somehow is that, and it's just layers of an onion. It's other, because what it is in itself is not resolvable. I mean, it's literally intrinsically, in reality, is not resolvable. It's intrinsically not resolvable. Now, that's just me saying that, and yeah, okay, anyone can say anything, but in fact, it happens to be that that's the case, and ultimately, you know, anyone that's claiming to find something is going to rub up against this fact, and whatever they find is going to be, you know, is going to prove to not be the last word. So science is doomed. I mean, I was thinking, actually, I was sort of toying with this train of thought. It was suggested that I might talk to the science of non-duality, or whatever. And I was saying, science of non-duality. You know, I mean, assuming non-duality is a euphemism for spirituality, which I don't grant. But let's just give them the benefit of the doubt and assume that it is. Science is the opposite of spirituality. Because spirituality is about settling into the actuality of unresolvability, and science is about the quest for resolution, or it pretends to be. What science really is an exploration of actuality to exploit them technologically, which is its proper function. It does very well at. But science pretends to be a search for actual resolution of describing what things actually are, and that enterprise is doomed to failure. Because there is no actual resolution. It's like a vanishing point. It's always going to be a vanishing point, no matter how close you get to it.
How do you know that for sure?
Huh?
How do you know that?
Because of what it is. I know it because of what this is, because of what I am.
Right.
It's due to failure, but it doesn't mean that they're going to stop.
Of course not.
And they're not going to stop finding.
Oh, the finding that as a technological exploration, exploit. That's what it really is. But it pretends to be a quest for what it really, you know, the ultimate answers to the ultimate questions, and there are no answers.
Yeah, because is just comes from a total mystery.
Yeah, the answer is infinite mystery.
Yeah, because that's where is comes from. I mean,
Yeah, it's what is.
Right,
It doesn't just come from it; it stays there.
Yeah.
Never left.
Right.
It's still home in infinite mystery.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I mean, I always think of in terms of like you're not going to climb up into the mind of God, and you're not going to get there.
No, and you're not going to ever go anywhere else in the mind of God.
I think there's also an appreciation that the more they delve into looking for that, the more I can appreciate that it's infinite.
Hopefully.
And I think there's a greater recognition of that.
But that
Somebody
but
doesn't
that trend
even
but
look.
at that point science isn't science anymore, it becomes yoga.
Well, science is another pathway.
Can be.
Yeah.
If you go the distance. But when you go the distance, you've left science behind.
Yeah.
You've graduated to the more mature approach of yoga.
The way you can say you know that it's infinite is sort of experientially feel it.
But there's no other fact. It's the sole fact.
Right.
The sole fact is the fact of absolute unresolvability.
Right.
And that's not a theory.
That's a recognition.
You can't find anything other than that. Slipperiness is all there is. It's like you never get to solid. It's not you never get through the slipperiness to something solid. It's slipperiness based on slipperiness. It's literally turtles all the way down.
But you experientially know that. I mean,
of course, it's obvious. Everyone always knows that already.
But is it in the math?
Well, the math comes from it. It actually is. But math itself is completely arbitrary, which demonstrates that. Math is bootstrapped out of nothing, which is what this is. So all apparent resolvability in math defines itself into existence. It's not actually there.
it's sort of like that idea that no matter how big a number you could have, if you have a supercomputer spitting out a number as big as you could possibly think, your intuition sort of knows that that's not the biggest number.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, you kind of know that.
Just add one.
Yeah, right.
Or put it to the power of itself. Yeah. Not really. Oh yeah? This is big.
Or square root.
Yeah. I mean, is that ultimately an intuitional thing? To see that
It's more than that. It's on every level of investigation. That's the result.
right.
Not just intuition. It's
Not
not.
just
It's not
intuition.
vague. You can look at it sensorially. You can look at it in terms of, hard scientific materialist measurements. You can look at it anywhere you look, and you find unresolvability.
Right.
The answer is always not quite this and not quite that. And you look closer, and it's still not quite this. And you look even closer, it's still not quite this and not quite that. You never get to an end. You never get to, okay, it's exactly, yes, it's that. And the only way to be precise with it is to be absolutely imprecise. So if you say, it's this, that's absolutely precise. But that's as imprecise as you can possibly be.
Paradoxically, it is always this.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have this plus this, and that is this.
Yeah.
It's always this.
Yeah. Reality minus reality is reality. Reality times reality is reality. Reality times 18 is reality. It never gets more or less, it never departs from itself, even if it presents as infinitely different than itself.
Right.
I mean, that's the weirdness. It's wherever you go, you can go anywhere. Wherever you are, you can always go somewhere else, and you haven't gone anywhere.
Right. Yeah.
Always. Whatever quality you're with, you can be with some other quality, and you haven't gone anywhere. It's always exactly this, and yet it can look like anything. But it never actually becomes any more or less. So it infinitely changes, and it never changes. Never departs from itself.
Yeah, that's more than the intuition. Yeah,
Well, it's fine. It's the only thing you can ever find.
Mhm.
Anywhere you look, the only result you will ever achieve is that.
Right.
Or to put it in in simple terms, in another way we were discussing tonight, all you ever find is. And is, you know, this way and is that way and is other way, but you look at those ways closely and they are definitely is, but exactly what they are, you look closer, they morph and they change, and you reveal fine points, and they're this, that, and the other, but there definitely is. And you look closer at each of those fine points, and they turn out to be a range. And again, so the closer you look, the more information you get. Is that. It's always just is with a range. There's always a range. It never resolves. It never finalizes. It never reaches a point of, yes, everything converges.
Right.
It doesn't converge to is because it never departs from is. But
That's
all
a
the
good one.
qualities continually, infinitely diverge.
Right.
You know, any parameter you're looking at experientially, it just absolutely diverges when you try and pin it down. You know, quantitatively or qualitatively or in any way. Never leave square one.
That's the good news.
Turns out. It ain't a bad thing.
And we have no idea how big square one is.
Oh, if at all.
You're right.
Does it even have dimension? Does this have? Who knows? Infinite space or the point? You make the call. How could you tell the difference? Well, it's just about quitting time, so why don't we call this one?
Yeah. Right.
It's a wrap.
Yeah.
We are at square one. I guess we must have arrived.